Welcome everyone to the Open Space Stewards. My name is Robert Wallace and I work for the City of Flagstaff's Open Space program. We're really excited to have you as a member of this team. So thank you so much for joining and welcome to the new season. The program that you're a part of really forms the backbone of conservation for our community's open space. So we're really thankful that you're a part of this goal. The purpose of the program is to better protect our open space through creating a presence on site to share knowledge with our users of open space, to complete small maintenance projects, to report findings to our program to help keep us informed of whenever our property needs maintenance so we can really better direct our efforts. Our purpose is going to be to support you through regular correspondence, providing any needed equipment or assistance you might need, providing opportunities for you to learn more about open space, and also following up with notifications to you to inform you of what progress has been taken as a result of your efforts. So thank you so much for taking the time to be here and learning more about open space. I hope that this presentation will help orient you to the city's 4 legally designated open space properties. I'm going to try to tell you a little bit about the history of each of the properties, a little bit about the resources, the recreational opportunities, the management direction for each of the properties. And I also hope to provide you, starting, a little bit of background on the city's program so you have a better understanding, and if you get questions in the field, you can answer those, anything that comes up. So thanks very much, and with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump right into my presentation. So I thought I would start by sharing some background on how we define open space. The city's Open Space Commission defines open space in their strategic plan as undeveloped or minimally developed lands that have been designated to protect natural resources, serve as buffers from development, and to provide opportunities for recreation that do not require facilities. So I think it's important to note that open space really does differ from parks in that it provides opportunities for passive recreation rather than structured recreation. So for an example, the difference between going for a walk versus playing a sport on a constructed field, or the difference between viewing wildlife versus using playground equipment. So we provide these kind of natural passive experiences on our open space properties. Additionally, I think it's important to understand that there's numerous vacant lands in and around Flagstaff that are often confused for protected open space. And though these properties can really add a lot to our neighborhoods and our community, at this point, the City of Flagstaff Open Space Program is actually only responsible for protecting and maintaining 4 main properties, and those being Picture Canyon, McMillan Mesa, Observatory Mesa, and Schultz Creek. So for the sake of this conversation, when I use the term open space, I'm referring to areas that have been legally designated as open space via a public open space zoning, a conservation easement, or another legal designation. I'm really proud to be a part of the open space program. I think that a lot of Flagstaff residents and visitors too find open space as one of the defining features of Flagstaff's character. And I think it's one of the things that certainly attracts me to town, and I think attracts a lot of people as well. I really feel that our program helps define the region's quality of life. It protects biodiversity, it improves environmental quality, it may even provide economic incentive for businesses, or provide visitors an interest for coming to see here. And it also protects a variety of historic and cultural resources at our different preserves. So the mission of our program is to protect and restore Flagstaff's natural and cultural and scenic resources to enhance recreational and educational opportunities for residents and visitors. So we're really extremely grateful that you've chosen to be a part of that mission. So just a little background on our open space program. The City of Flagstaff's program was essentially founded in 1998 as an outgrowth of the Flagstaff Area Open Space and Greenways Plan. This plan is a multiple agency planning effort to identify community values associated with open space while planning for development and urban expansion. So as a direct result of this plan, the city established the Open Spaces Commission to serve as an advisory body for open space acquisitions, management, and maintenance to City Council and to our program, and that happened in 2003. So actually at that point, our program didn't exist, so they were reporting directly to City Council. So that actually happens later, as you'll see here as I continue down the timeline. Since that time, there have been a number of significant steps that I think have helped establish our current open space system. So in 2004, Flagstaff voters approved two separate open space bonds. One directed at acquiring neighborhood open space and properties for the Flagstaff Urban Trail System, and another directed or dedicated for the purpose of purchasing state trust land on Observatory Mesa. So these bonds were leveraged against two separate Growing Smarter grants from the Arizona State Parks to acquire around 2,700 acres of legally designated open space. And that happened in 2002 and 2013, Picture Canyon Natural and Cultural Preserve and Observatory Mesa Natural Area, respectively. So that was a really big step for our program in initially getting some property protected. And the community was very much involved in moving that forward. City staff didn't actually begin managing tasks associated with open space really until 2010. And we had our first staff member approved and hired in 2015. And that was a position that had to be renewed by City Council every year during the budget process. In 2016, the community got the McMillan Mesa Proposition 413 listed on the ballot, and that was passed by the public. That was a really big step for our program as well. And then in 2017, the Flagstaff City Council adopted the management plan for legally designated open space properties. And this was a big milestone as well, because this management plan outlines the policies and projects associated with managing natural and cultural resources on our open space properties. And then I think one of the last kind of important milestones was in 2018, our position for managing open space was actually reclassified as a permanent position, so City Council doesn't have to approve that every budget during the budget review every year. So that was a big goal, or a form of progress as well. So now for a background on our actual open space properties, I'm going to move into Picture Canyon here. So this first slide here shows the location of Picture Canyon, and that's the orange parcel that you see in the center. The blue parcel is being private property. The green parcel is, I believe, being Forest Service. Sorry, this is a small screen. And then the turquoise being state property. And so you can see that the preserve is really surrounded by a lot of private property or property that could potentially be developed. So it's really in a key area that will provide the east side of Flagstaff with a great recreational opportunity. And of course, all residents of Flagstaff, because there is a little trailhead there that you can drive over there and get access as well. It's a very popular area. We estimate around 15 to 20,000 visitors a year. And it has some great recreational opportunities, as you likely know, some very nice trails and overlooks there. So just a little history on Picture Canyon. The community was very involved in the protection of the Picture Canyon Natural and Cultural Preserve. And so it really is credit to our community for its protection. It's around 478 acres. The name Picture Canyon comes from the fact that it was inhabited by the Northern Sinagua between approximately 700 and 1300 AD. And it's a very culturally rich area. Archaeologists have identified 29 different cultural sites within the preserve. Some of those have been listed on the Arizona State Museum and National Register of Historic Places. Approximately 100 separate petroglyph panels have been identified, and that I think is nearly 800 individual petroglyph images that are actually pecked into the canyon walls and basalt boulders there. So there's some real significant cultural resources there. In addition to what I mentioned, there has been pit houses excavated there, one which you can actually see. And there's concentrations of pottery sherds, which make it a real unique Northern Arizona site. In addition to that time period, there's a lot of historic history there as well, involving ranching and timber harvest. In 1876, the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad, one of the largest transcontinental railways, was completed. And this really created a national market for lumber companies. So from 1887 to about 1966, the Ponderosa Pine Forests of Northern Arizona were really the scene of extensive network of logging railways. And so Picture Canyon was definitely part of this, and that's a big part of its history. Throughout the Flagstaff area, a cumulative total of over 770 miles of rail line were built for logging companies to access stands of timber for harvest. The Greenlaw Lumber Company installed a rail line at Picture Canyon to harvest timber in 1908 and 1909, and they used cross-cut saws to cut down trees. So almost everything you see at Picture Canyon is second growth. And then horses were used to, transport logs to the rail line, and then they were shipped the remainder of the way to the mill on those lines. So you can see several of those old railroad beds at the preserve. After completing the cutting operation, the line was typically abandoned by the logging company, and then they moved to search for new forest stands to cut. There is a remnants of an old railway trestle, a wooden structure that allowed the train to essentially to cross the streamage and drainage. And the Greenlaw Mill actually used that to move timber to the mill, which is located near where present-day Flagstaff Mall is. Something else that I think is worth mentioning here in the history is the Rio de Flag flow. You likely know, living in Flagstaff, that the Rio de Flag does not flow all year. It is an annual stream, so it flows in snowmelt, and it flows during the monsoon season at times when we get a big enough rain. But because the water reclamation plant is nearby, there actually is a fairly reliable flow through the canyon, which helps provide great habitat for all kinds of wildlife. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a little bit. So the resource is really special in Picture Canyon. It really has a variety of habitats. If you go there and you look at the different plants, you can see, of course, ponderosa pine, just like the rest of Flagstaff, but you can also see some Doug firs there that are more prevalent in the Pacific Northwest. And then you can see on the south side of the canyon in the sunny section, all kinds of plants that you'd more commonly see in more deserty areas like in the Phoenix region. So that variety of biodiversity really provides great habitat for all kinds of wildlife. And that is possible why the Sinagua chose it as a great place to live as well. The property supports over 130 species of birds. You can see elk there, you can see mule deer, you can see bats at night kind of come down to the pond. You can see bald eagles, falcons, all kinds of wildlife there. And part of that is to do to the fact that the Rio de Flag does flow through the preserve. And I wanted to mention here that we have an agreement between the City of Flagstaff and the Arizona Game and Fish Department that essentially helps ensure permanent water supply through the stretch of the Rio de Flag to help support the riparian area and wildlife. And that is about to renew, needs to be renewed in the year 2030, and that's something that our program is actually working on now. Some other neat, significant parts of the resource there, of course, is the waterfall. It's the only place that there's a really waterfall along the Rio de Flag, and then the cultural sites that I mentioned already. There's great recreational opportunities at Picture Canyon. I love to hike there. There's great hiking trails where you can walk or bike. And we do allow equestrian use as well. So you'll notice that some of the nearby neighborhoods actually take advantage of that and do ride horses in the preserve. The area also is used as an outdoor classroom by, I think, the FUSD school system, Northern Arizona University, sometimes the Museum of Northern Arizona, and other organizations. So it's a great place to actually do outdoor learning. The cultural sites are definitely a major attraction. The Waterbird petroglyph site and the petroglyph overlook being right along the trails and very easy to access and visit and look at. I think a lot of visitors love to imagine the meaning of these petroglyphs, and it's a real good possibility that while you're out there patrolling trails, that you're going to get questions about the meaning of some of these. And I think it's important to remember that interpreting the meaning of these is really difficult. Native people who trace their ancestry and cultural traditions to this site really can offer insightful interpretations. But these interpretations do vary greatly. Petroglyphs can be symbolic of a language, perhaps. They can function like a map. They might have spiritual qualities. They might represent clan symbols or communicate stories, or signify cultural territories. So we really don't know. We can't readily interpret what they mean. So just kind of keep that in mind as you go out there and let people use their imagination a little bit. Regardless of their true meaning, they're certainly fascinating, and it's important to help take care of them. And this is definitely one of our goals of our program. So please feel empowered to remind visitors that petroglyphs are very fragile, and they shouldn't be climbing on them. You shouldn't be carving or leaving any marking behind. That's a big problem that we get in the preserve. And you shouldn't be touching them, even because the oils in your hands can damage that rock art over time. There has been a lot of restoration efforts at Picture Canyon through some of those grants. When the Wildcat Hill wastewater treatment plant was constructed in the 1970s, the Rio de Flag was channelized to a straight channel, essentially, to discharge the water. So discharged water would be carried away quickly. And this channelization dissected the floodplain and prohibited annual floods that supported the floodplain area. And it really resulted in a drying out of the area where invasive plants could easily establish themselves and flourish. And so this is a real big problem. So the Rio de Flag really had to be restored, and some of those grant funds were used for that purpose, and some of these photos you can see up. So the grant helped fund the construction of the deep water pond and wetland area that you see in the preserve now, and a planting of native riparian vegetation within the stream channel, and then also restoring the natural curve of the stream to slow down the water. So invasive plants would essentially be less able to inhabit that area. So that was a very, very big project. And in fact, we still work on maintaining invasives in the preserve, which I'll talk about in a sec. Another effort of restoring the preserve was cleaning it up. For many years, the area was used as a place to get rid of trash. And so there were a number of old cars and other trash in the canyon. And the community and partners really came together to help clean it up. So you don't see any of this today, which is really nice. But here's a couple of photos of the work that was done initially with some of those funds. We even used a very large crane to get some of those cars out of the canyon. Another effort for restoring the area is to return the area to its natural biodiversity. And part of that is removing all the invasives, the Scotch thistle, bull thistle, yellow star thistle, knapweed. And the community has really come together. The Picture Canyon Working Group is a big part of this as well. In the initial restoration efforts of the grant, some of the topsoil had to be removed because the seed bank was so huge. And so it's been a very big effort, and we've been trying to keep these invasive weeds at bay as best as possible. And of course, we can always use as much help as we can get. So if you hear about a Wednesday weed walk or another weed pull on a weekend, and you have a couple of hours, this is a great way to help keep the preserve in great shape. Or if you're just out for a patrol and you happen to have a shovel that you can carry along, or some big beefy leather gloves, and you see one of these invasive plants, please take the time to pull it out and get rid of that. And that definitely is going to help maintain the preserve over a long time. So I just wanted to kind of share a little bit about the management direction of the canyon. You know, we do have a graffiti problem, so part of what the open space stewards do is monitor for any new graffiti. If you see any out there, please let us know. And of course, if you see somebody actively doing that, please try to educate them. And you know, in some cases, I wouldn't hesitate to use the police department's non-emergency line to contact the police department to report any violations of that sort, because these resources are irreplaceable. Yeah, we want to continue to manage the property for education, so promoting schools to get out, promoting community tours and that sort of thing. So that's part of our future direction as well. Making sure the public use the preserve appropriately, you know, not leaving graffiti or trash behind. And as I mentioned before, we want to try to maintain the water flow through the canyon. And it does have to be renewed, and we're working on that now. And as Flagstaff continues to grow, the value of reclaimed water actually is more substantial. And so we have to look to the future to be able to provide Flagstaff's needs, but also to be able to maintain these very important riparian areas for the community and for wildlife and plants of the preserve. So that is Picture Canyon in a nutshell. I'm kind of cruising through this. So if you have questions, I want you to feel free to reach out, but I'm going to move on to Observatory Mesa. So here you see a map of Observatory Mesa. You'll notice that it's just to the west of Thorpe Park there, and it's a large area consisting of 4 separate parcels. The parcels there in the left map, the ones in orange, are the parcels that are part of the Observatory Mesa natural area. The rest of the preserve is surrounded by a lot of private property. Lowell Observatory owns the purple parcel, and then the Forest Service owns some parcels to the west of the mesa and also the central parcel that you see there as well. So the mesa is really widely used by our community. And I think that might be one of the reasons that the community felt strongly about its preservation. So that's partially why they voted for an open space bond that helped fund the preservation of this property. So that is very fortunate. The mesa is, the protected area is about 2,200 acres. It's a great natural amenity for northern Arizona. And it really does provide a great habitat for wildlife, especially wildlife that need to traverse from the San Francisco peaks down to the Mogollon Rim. Additionally, it does provide the town within city limits great places to go out and recreate. And we like to call those neighbor woods for both visitors and our residents as well. So the resource consists of a wide variety of wildlife and plants. You'll see some oak shrub stands up there and ponderosa pine. It provides great recreational opportunities. I think that you will have opportunities to bike, hike, run. In the wintertime, sometimes snowshoeing. Springtime is a great time to get out and bird watch. And given its location and proximity close to town, it provides pretty decent access right from the Thorpe Park area. Additionally, Observatory Mesa is a real important component of the Flagstaff area ecosystem in the sense that it's part of the Rio de Flag watershed. There are a number of drainages and seepages and springs that make it a really important component of that watershed. Let's see here. One other thing that comes to mind is it does actually provide great buffer from wildfires from the Forest Service. And I'm sure you're aware that they've been doing some thinning projects up there that have helped keep that forest healthy. And I'll show you a couple of photos of that in a second. Also, given the fact that it's very close to Lowell Observatory, it's very important for protecting Flagstaff's dark night skies and preventing light pollution in the vicinity of the observatory. Recently, well, I shouldn't say recently. if you're up on the Observatory Mesa, we only have like 2 real formal trails there, and you might have to go back to the last slide and take a look at the trails that are formal. Everything else is an old road or an unauthorized trail, and this is pretty problematic. This slide actually shows you a picture of a new trail that has been developed here since the end of 2019 and the early spring of 2020 here. And these are being done without any surveys or consideration of the resource or wildlife movements. And so this can really disrupt the habitat, and it also violates our conservation easement with Arizona State Parks, unfortunately. So this is something that we're really working to prevent. In a moment, I'm going to talk a little bit about future direction and how we're taking that into consideration. I kind of mentioned some of the recreational aspects of the Mesa. Great place to walk, bike. We allow horseback riding, and we do partner with Arizona Game and Fish to permit archery hunting. The Arizona Game and Fish Department has provided us with some grant funds to help take care of the preserve if we maintain access for archery hunting. So that is something that you might see folks out doing with the proper permits. So that brings me into what some of the restoration of the Mesa has been. We have worked on some signage, some fence maintenance, but the majority of the maintenance has been thinning projects, as you see photographed here in this slide. And this has been really important to improving the health of the Mesa and also protecting the city from a catastrophic wildfire encroachment. The future management direction of the property really has to consider the conservation easement of the property because it restricts the use of the property to passive recreational uses. It also restricts the amount of the area that can be developed, and that even includes something like as simple as a trail. So we are actually required to submit an annual report to the Arizona State Parks outlining all the improvement projects and getting permission for any project in advance so that we can ensure the preservation of these places for us and for future generations as well. So that is a part of our goal, is to implement a sustainable trail system. I mentioned we really only have 2 small trails, and we'd like to create something that meets the needs of the community and could potentially be an economic asset for the community as well. And we are working on coming up with an initial plan now, and we'll be reaching out to the community to get input and feedback, and coming up eventually with a concept plan together as a community to present to the Arizona State Parks as a future project. So that is on the horizon. Also, providing equitable access to the mesa is something that we're thinking of for future management. And then providing adequate signage, both for trail direction and communicating the rules and regulations for the preserve. So the next property is the Schultz Creek, and this is a small property. It's only 20 acres. It is a legally designated open space property located on the east side. Located east of intersection of Schultz Pass and Mount Eldon Lookout roads. So if you take up Highway 180 and then take Mount Eldon Lookout Road, that property is very close to what the community calls the Y, where the community kind of uses it as an informal parking area. So the property I'm speaking to is the property immediately to the east of that. And it does have some adjacent landowners, as you can kind of see in the map here. The Coconino National Forest, of course, owns some parcels in that area. There are some private residents, and then the Museum of Arizona owns some property in that area as well. For such a small parcel, this actually has a very unique history. There's a portion of the Beale Wagon Road that's evident on the property, and in October of 1857, an expedition was led by Edward Beale, who was tasked with establishing essentially a route along the 35th parallel from Fort Smith, Arkansas to Los Angeles, California. So it's pretty neat that you can see the remnants of an old spur there. This is also the site of an original reservoir from the Interbasin Waterline. In 1898, the city of Flagstaff and the Santa Fe Pacific Railroad entered into a contract where the railroad leased the land for water rights and a pipeline route to town. In exchange, the town constructed the collection facilities, the pipeline from the springs, a reservoir, a distribution system to the railroad, and then set a price that essentially more than covered the lease. So you can still see that the remnant of that reservoir visible on the property, and that is something that we hope to protect and potentially maybe interpret in the future. The reservoir was able to bring water to Flagstaff, and it led to agreements between lumber and railroad companies. These water right agreements also helped develop Flagstaff and helped it grow in the early 1900s. In 1916, the Santa Fe Land Improvement Company acquired the land and water rights from the Santa Fe Railroad and deeded the land and its water rights over to the town of Flagstaff. The transfer of the title was conditioned on the terms of a 1914 agreement being maintained, including payments to the railroad totaling about $235,000. And that debt was fully paid in 1938. By 1922, with water supplies again being inadequate, the town improved Jack Smith Springs, and added a second, larger reservoir adjacent to the last. And these reservoirs, one which is remaining in service, can still be seen just north of the Museum of Northern Arizona property, just south of the Schultz Pass Road. The next bit of history involved John Aver, who leased the property from the city of Flagstaff to build and operate the Cowboy Country Club between 1939 and 1982. The country club eventually burned down, I think, in 1982, but you can still see some remnants on the property and the adjacent properties as well. In October 2013, the Flagstaff City Council recommended incorporating approximately 20 acres, this 20 acres, into the open space program after receiving substantial public input regarding the issue. And then in 2017, an ordinance of the Flagstaff City Council amended the Flagstaff zoning map to rezone this parcel from rural residential to public open space for the purpose of providing access and connectivity to the Schultz Creek area. I'm sorry, I actually should have been on this next slide. I guess you can read through that. It's most of what I just talked about a second ago here. So I'm going to go ahead and jump to the next one. So the resource, there are some cultural resources in the nearby vicinity on Forest Service land, and we're in the process of conducting a cultural resource on the property and have located sites, which consist of sherds and other items. So it does have some cultural significance from the Sinagua. The natural environment is important as well. It's right along the Schultz Creek area, so it has some riparian plants in the area. And this area is actually very important to the Dry Lakes, Mount Eldon Dry Lake Hills area. And it's an important access area into the forest for biking, walking, horseback riding, you name it. So I'm going to jump right into management direction, because this has been something that has been recently communicated to the City Council. Actually, City Council proposed direction to Flagstaff Open Space to help or to essentially investigate opportunities to meet the community's needs in regards to improving access and connectivity to the area. There is a Forest Service trailhead further down the Schultz Pass Road, and it's right along the creek. It has some steep parking areas, so it might not be the best location for that trailhead over time as use increases. And so we looked at creating some potential concept plans for this property that would help meet that community need through the potential development of a trailhead on the far east side of the property. And then that would be connected to the Flagstaff Urban Trail system for alternative access to the property so people weren't driving as much. That recently did go to City Council, and they decided not to move forward with it at this time, but it is something that could be an important partnership with the Forest Service to help provide access to this area for the future. So we might consider something like that if we're able to get funding. Overall, we do want to protect the property as much as we can. So if we were to move forward on something like that, it would be a minimal. There's another map of the location of the area. And then I'll move into McMillan Mesa. McMillan Mesa is right in the heart of downtown Flagstaff. So if you know where Buffalo Park is, it's just south of Buffalo Park there, the light green that you see. And it has a great variety of trails already developed on site. Community, the parcel has a unique history. The community members and local organizations really advocated for the preservation of the greater McMillan Mesa area for decades. And through the years, various agencies proposed plans and concepts for the property. But there wasn't really a consensus of what the primary use should be. So these plans really did range from building golf courses, to other types of development, to preserving the entire property, or just doing nothing, essentially. The Flagstaff 2030 regional plan designated portions of the city parcel on the mesa north of Forest Avenue as an employment area, and the southwest as future suburban. So those areas will potentially see some development for. The areas outside of Buffalo Park that are marked white as a map, those areas do not bind the parcels to any specific use. So the community initiative, there was a community initiative to protect this and listed on the ballot. That's Proposition 413. And that did pass in November 8th, 2016. And approximately 86% of Flagstaff voters voted in favor for Proposition 413. So it just kind of gives you an idea of the amount of support that the city of Flagstaff residents have for protecting this area. So that's really neat. Much of what is now McMillan Mesa was actually a component of the U.S. Forest Service holdings in Flagstaff area. The city traded land in the inner basin of the San Francisco Peaks to the Forest Service for larger parcels on McMillan Mesa, and what is actually now considered Buffalo Park. And the area was named for Thomas McMillan, one of the earliest Flagstaff area settlers who owned land near what is now Cheshire and the Museum of Northern Arizona. He was a prominent citizen in Flagstaff community and an early Coconino County supervisor. So the proposition restricted the use of approximately 300 acres of property on the McMillan Mesa to public open space and passive recreation. So the land is currently zoned as public facilities and rural residential, and that was as of March 2019. And both of which actually permit outdoor public uses and general passive recreation. So therefore, the city can actually plan and develop trails, trailheads, parking, and other amenities, consistent with that initiative. According to the ordinance, the city cannot sell the land or permit any of the other allowed uses under public facilities or rural residential, and therefore it's protected as open space, essentially. Even though the current zoning allows for passive recreation uses by proposition, though, City Council did give our program direction to rezone the property as public open space, and we are actually in the process of doing that currently. The natural area is surrounded by private parcels. So there are some designated city property lands, such as McPherson Park and Buffalo Park, and some other city-owned properties in the area as well. But because it is such close proximity to neighborhoods, it really provides great access to our community. So the neighborhoods, including Switzer Mesa, McMillan Mesa Village, Stone Ridge, Hospital Hill, the area around the USGS, the Nassau Business Park, Grandview Homes, and Sunnyside really have great access into the protected natural area. So this really provides a great place for people to relax, enjoy a variety of outdoor activities, and hopefully it will continue to do that in the future. So the resource, the topography of McMillan Mesa was shaped by periods of tectonic scale, geologic change in the western United States over the last 65 million years or so. We had rapid uplift associated with the rise of the Colorado Plateau, and that began around 5 million years ago, and still is continuing to occur. And then more recent, the localized fracturing and faulting and uplift is also related to the volcanism in the surrounding San Francisco volcanic field. So McMillan Mesa, what you see now, was formed when an event near Woody Ridge erupted during a volcanic period about 6 million years ago. And thick basalt flows spread across the surface outcrops of red Moan Koki sandstone and slowly have eroded into the weathered rocks that we see today. The resource also, in conjunction with Buffalo Park, preserves one of the last intact native grasslands within the city. So that's another really important attribute for this property. Recreation-wise, there's a number of great walking and biking trails in the natural area. The Arizona Trail does actually come through the property as well. We do not allow equestrian use on the property. So folks that are riding the Arizona Trail on horse have to use the bypass that goes through Picture Canyon. So future management direction for this property. We're hopefully working on completing a cultural survey for the natural area to identify any cultural resources so we can better protect those. We currently have some open space stewards that are working with us to mitigate graffiti on some current petroglyph locations. So that's some work that we've been working on as well. We're considering developing interpretive materials for the Beal Wagon Road. Another spur of the Beal Wagon Road actually came to McMillan Mason in addition to the Schultz Creek parcel. We're investigating opportunities to work with Foots to achieve accessible ADA compliant trails. We're thinking also about designing some stalls, or excuse me, some signs and installing that signage as far as like regulatory signage, some trail signage, an orientation kiosk, maybe a few interpretive signs throughout the natural area. And then we thought we'd also investigate the need for recycling and trash facilities in the preserve as well. We did go out to the community and get a survey on how they would like us to manage the preserve. And overall, I'd like to say that the preserve or the community supports the protection of the preserve and limited development related to the points that I just kind of brought up. So that is the direction that we will be taking. So that brings us to the end, I believe, of our property history here. So just as a reminder of what our open space program does, aside from managing protected open space, our program hosts a number of events and projects each year. We organize volunteer events like Make a Difference Day or a National Trails Day that involve maintaining and constructing trails. We develop educational, regulatory, and directional signage to improve visitor experiences at our open space. We are tasked with drafting management plans and that guide the practices and principles for our natural areas. We coordinate restoration projects, including forest thinning, invasive weed removal, and riparian habitat enhancements. And we research opportunities to purchase additional open space properties to implement an integrated open space system for the Flagstaff community that would allow everyone 10-minute access from wherever they live within the city limits. So we have a lot of ambitious goals, and the truth is that we cannot do it alone. We have a very small budget, and we rely very heavily on volunteers like yourself. So when you're out there, you can think about some of these as things that you can do. You know, when you're out there at a property, you're creating a valuable presence. Try to report any concerns and needs that you happen upon. Helping the house to keep the space clean and usable is really important. And reporting any violations that you might see so we can ensure that these places are properly protected. If you have the opportunity to participate in any land management projects, we'd encourage you to do so. You know, that could include something like a Wednesday weed pull or another project, an open space event where we're educating the public. Those are really important to kind of keep the community engaged. And then when you see people out there, make sure that they know that you're out there. And if they have questions, you can answer those and help educate them on the site. I think it's important for them to know that whatever they pack in to the preserve, they need to pack out. So keeping and disposing of their trash appropriately, leaving the natural and cultural features undamaged and in place for others to enjoy. Staying at designated trails helps take care of the preserve. Parking in designated places, using the preserve appropriately and wisely for continued preservation. So I want to end by just thanking you for taking the time to listen today. I hope that you learned a little bit about the open space program and its role and the properties that we protect. And I really appreciate the role that you're taking on to help us preserve these places. So at this point, I'd be happy to take any questions you may have. So you can see the email there in this slide. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to my colleague Leela, and we will sit down and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. And thank you again, and welcome to the Open Space Stewards.